Hey, Tripp, welcome to the show.
Hi, Keith. Hello, Will. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you guys again. Good to talk.
So good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a while. Tripp, why don't you say a little bit about just what you're really up to right now, what you're focusing on before we kind of dive in to this topic of men in leadership, what to know, and just say a little bit more about what you're up to.
Yeah, these days I've been talking a lot about the book that I just released. The book's called This Book Will Make You Dangerous. And it's the culmination of being a coach, professional coach for 15 years to men, but also just being in the personal growth, personal development field for 20 plus years. And, before that, I was a business owner I'm fumbling my way through life. And someone came to me and recently and was like, why don't you write a book? And I said, well, I throw most books in the trash because they essentially just try to perpetuate a mindset and a worldview that I don't really want to help with. This idea that you just need a little bit more. And then once you get there, you'll be set for life. And there's this, golden velvet rope area of life. And I'm just not interested in perpetuating that idea. And so the question became, what's the book you wouldn't throw in the trash? And I thought about who I was 15 plus years ago when I was, it was 20 plus years ago when I was dealing with the fallout of my mother's suicide that I hadn't dealt with in 13 years at that point, and just fumbling through life. And I was seeing a therapist at that time, but not really applying myself, certainly not open to things emotionally. I was really cut off from that whole thing. And there was this whole world waiting for me. And so I started thinking about that guy that's crossed over and starting to see that there's another world available to him if he's willing to get to know himself emotionally and integrate that part of his life a bit more. And so, I've got to reconnecting with that guy, trying to help him out and pull him through at the widest end of the funnel into this personal growth stuff. And it's been rewarding. It's been rewarding to see that it's connecting with folks and providing an on-ramp into that conversation.
Well, let's start with what you just talked about. Very high level, very meta. You've been working with men for a really long time. A lot of men who are trying to achieve more in their life, gain better intimacy skills, gain better leadership skills, gain better, success in businesses. And what if we just start really high level, which is like, what journey are you tend to have to take most men on in terms of where they're coming from to where they need to get to, and what are they bringing in the beginning of their journey? If we talk about like what are some common men's issues, that's another way to say it, that you're really looking at, in common men's frameworks that are very outdated, old, and really need to shift.
Yeah, well, I think there's the things that I see that they're needing, and then the things that they say that they're wanting. And so I don't think that they have to be opposed to one another. I think that they can work in conjunction with one another. So if somebody comes to me and says they want greater success in their life, or they want more sex, or they want to make more of an impact, or to, start to create a legacy, I'm listening for what's really going on in their own life and starting to see their life as a whole, and starting to recognize that they've got a sense that their mortality, it's like when we start to recognize that their mortality is in play, what are we really playing for here? What's more important than just making another zero on the net worth? What's more important than just being more desirable or more admirable to other folks? These are things that I've been challenged to deal with in my own life. And so I like to use those things. Okay, let's use money, or let's use success, or let's use sex, or as a doorways into a much deeper conversation about who you really want to be and what the experiences you really want to have in this lifetime. The specifics of that will be pretty different from each man, but most of us are just wanting to feel more free, more alive, more deeply connected and loved for who we are. And we all essentially just want to have greater peace of mind when our head hits the pillow at night, that yes, I'm living my life. And if I were to die tomorrow, I've lived my life fully. I've yet to meet anybody that doesn't want those things. And so instead of getting caught up in fancy terms or really fancy high level ideas, I just try to bring it back down to that. How can we live with greater freedom, aliveness, love, and peace today as we work towards some of the things that we want to create? And oftentimes, if we're we're doing our work and more freedom, aliveness, love, and peace are being experienced, sometimes those things we thought we really couldn't live without or maybe aren't such a big deal anymore.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've worked with a lot of men also over the years, and I like how you're saying, like, you don't tend to, you try and pierce through the content of what they're first talking about into, what's behind that and what they're really trying to go after. And I love the concept of just, more freedom, more aliveness. And what if we drop it down to masculine power or power in men, and we start to talk about leadership a little bit? What have you, again, this is still kind of high level, but what have you kind of learned? What have you kind of learned about in terms of healthy and unhealthy power and leadership for men? Some of your takeaways.
I prefer to break leadership down into a very, very, very simple kind of model. And it's essentially our ability to answer the question, what do I want? This is very different from what should I do? What's expected of me? What will they think of me? For most of us, there's a lot of folks that we see out there in the world that are following those questions. Those questions are driving them. I want a greater, deeper purpose in my life. Well, if we were to really take a look at your actions throughout the day, most of the time you're answering the question, what do I do so that I'm not uncomfortable? What do I do so that I don't put myself at risk? What do I do so that I don't look like a moron? I don't look like a failure? And even people in great, quote, leadership positions are still driven by these types of questions. They're defensive questions. They're survival-based questions. What do I do to get through this and not be harmed? Whereas leadership, I think, is coming back to, all right, given that things are scary and given that life's going to be uncomfortable and risky and people just aren't going to get me and I'm going to be criticized from time to time, what do I really want? And I think that question starts to put us on a much different path in life. And we can call this masculine, but I think it's just more of that kind of eros, that part of us that is here to create and bring something into the world, whether we identify as male or female. But I think more and more it's just that, what is trying to be lived through me and as me? And most of us have never practiced, what do I want? Even at the most basic level, they get up in the morning, they put on the shirt that everybody else wears to work that day. They never ask themselves, what shirt do I want to wear? What food do I want to put into my body? How do I want to be touched by my lover? Most of us just aren't doing that. We're just in this autopilot mode and going through life in that way. And then we wonder why we feel trapped. We feel drained. We feel isolated. We feel bored. We feel overwhelmed. We haven't stepped into that self-leadership first. And then we can start to talk about the ways, and I think we can start to segue into some of the ways that things are healthy in that regard. Most of us are not asking ourselves what we want because it's dangerous. It's dangerous, meaning that if I'm going to put myself out there, I'm going to own my power and I'm going to speak up for what I want, I might get criticized. I might be rejected. I am vulnerable in that sense. On the second side is most of us have associated owning what we want with dominating others or belittling others or diminishing others in some way. Neither of those options are very good. This is, I run a podcast called The New Man, and the tagline is Beyond the Macho Jerk and the New Age Wimp. Well, the macho jerk bowls people over. He postures through life. He's still a fear-based thing, but he's essentially just running people over as he answers that question, what do I want? Whereas the New Age Wimp is like, just tell me what you want and I'll go along with it. We're all one here, baby. So learning how to own our power means we are going to be firm in what we want, but we're also open to what the impact is on others and that we can co-create with others. And that's a really nuanced place to be able to own both of those things in the world. And then take that step slowly, one by one, where typically we're collapsing or we're posturing.
Okay, that's great. Tripp, thanks for that. That was sort of fundamental of connection with self first. What do I want? So it sounds like that's a big theme in your work with people, is seeing that, a lot of guys are struggling with, can I even access my own desire? Can I lead from the desire to create? And I'm curious, when when people get to the next level, let's say they're able to do that fundamental kind of, bachelor's degree and self-knowledge of self-desire, get the practices in place to do that every day, then let's say there's a purpose, a bigger vision of an impact, or a vision to create that's bigger than just something that they're going to do themselves personally, and they need to get other people involved. They need to enroll other people in their vision and their mission. What do you see as the big kind of bugaboos or the big stumbling blocks for guys who don't want to go down the domination path or the new age WAMP path?
Yeah, it's being in relationship. It's really learning can I own what I want and still be in relationship with others? And I'm challenged by this. I love running a lean business. I love having a lot of control. It's an edge for me to rely on others, to depend on others, to not be disappointed by others. That's the big fear. And so for a lot of us, it's just navigating that interpersonal domain of recognizing this is my role. And this is what's different in an organization, is that I have a role, and my role is to be responsible for ABC, which means I'm going to be asking you to do certain things. And it is our agreement that is your job to do those things. So there's a power differential there. It's co-created, but there's a power differential there. And I still see a lot of guys afraid to own that power and just assert, I want ABC done by Friday. Will you do that? There's this thing like, I don't want to be a jerk. What are they going to think of me? I want to be the cool guy. So they're stuck in this pattern of protecting and pleasing and proving. But I think more and more is like we've kind of gotten really sensitized to things, and it was necessary. But I think now it's great to come back and be able to integrate some of that firmness with also some of that sensitivity. Hey, I know this is going to have an impact on you, but we have an agreement here. This is what we're doing. We've got a mission. We're creating ABC, and your role is to do X, Y, Z. So I want that done Friday. And I think most of us don't understand that it's a real gift to be able to say, I want ABC and I want it done Friday. We can always come back and say something different, but I don't like being in organizations, or I don't like being in situations where there's not a clear sense of somebody driving or somebody putting some ideas out there. It turns into a swamp. I was recently working with a doctor on something. I needed something, and he was really wishy-washy. He has gave me like 3 options for something, and I noticed I was getting anxious and like, I need help here. And he wasn't really willing to put it out there. And I said, Doc, what would you do if you were in my situation? I had to coach him to essentially, and he was like, oh, well, I would do ABC. I was like, thank you. It was such a service to own that and put that out there, where I think he was just didn't want to be a jerk and didn't want to be, I don't know, he was protecting something. And I understand that, but it's really his job is to own that and put that out there, and then let me decide, see me as an individual, and then let me decide what I want to do.
Yeah. So then abdicating that power can create anxiety in an organization, and the people who are in a consensual agreement to fulfill their responsibilities, essentially.
Exactly. And I think without a clear mission, without a clear sense of what we're doing, then the mission becomes, hey, we're all here to get along, and we're all here to have a nice time. I've been in organizations like that, and it's like, we're not getting anywhere. We have meetings, but we're not creating anything. We're not making a difference.
Do you think that fear of upsetting someone, or fear of being perceived as an asshole is always trauma based? Or, I mean, are those patterns from childhood or from culture, or what is your sense of where that comes
I think they're
from?
hardwired. I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but there certainly is evidence to support that if you did anything to dominate too much in the group and you weren't worthy of that role, you would be challenged and you'd be put in your place. And if you didn't do enough to pull your weight, if you were a freeloader, you also got booted too. So I think we're hardwired to maintain a certain position, a Goldilocks position within our group. And so when we start to exercise power above that, there's a real vulnerability. I'm from the South. There's a saying that the further up the flagpole you get, the more that we can see your ass. And most of us are just afraid to show our ass in that way, or afraid to be that vulnerable. But again, if we're going to throw around this idea of leadership, it comes with the job.
Mhm.
What do you feel like is a what's the impetus for, I mean, I think there's gonna be a lot of answers here, but how do men start climbing up the flagpole within themselves? Right? So like, wherever you're at on the flagpole and you're wanting to be more empowered, you're wanting to lead more, you're wanting to create more, you're wanting to serve more, you're wanting to achieve more, and you're somewhere on the pole, and there's all different kinds of issues of why you can't get to the next part of the pole.
Yeah.
Right. So just, maybe a little, it could be a story of someone, or just, a little thought here on how do men break through different layers in themselves to get to that next level of inner leadership that can translate to outer leadership.
Yeah. Well, I think it's first is to really establish what our metrics are. I'm going to use that term rather. It sounds kind of cold. But for many of us, we tend to find an ideal. We idealize a person. We idealize a figure. We come up with an image in our mind. We might even get a foam core board and put pictures on it. And we say, this is where I'm going. This is where I'm headed. And it's externalized. And what we don't understand is that we've externalized this vision, this ideal, but we have a theory that if I were to create that, then I'm going to feel differently. And we know it would be a failure if we created this external idealized version of ourselves, this leader, this guy up the flagpole, or this, picture of our organization. We know it'd be a failure if you got there and we're celebrating, we pop the champagne, and I say, how do you feel? And you say, I actually feel trapped. I feel drained. I feel isolated. I feel overwhelmed. Saying, we got something wrong. Because I meet a lot of those guys. They've done something really cool for themselves and for whatever. And then you have a deeper conversation with them, and then like, I feel empty. Something's way off. Something went wrong somewhere. The theory didn't pan out. They created the vision. They achieved that ideal, but it didn't land for them in their inner authority. So the metric for me is like, let's start from this place. Let's start with an awareness. Imagine we have these gauges on the dashboard. Okay, am I moving in the direction that's allowing greater freedom? Am I allowing greater aliveness, greater love, greater peace of mind as we go? Now I can go put these flags out there and I can move towards them. I want to make a certain amount of money. I want to have a certain, size for my business. I want to have a wife and kids, et cetera, whatever those things might be, those external types of things. But we're going to be checking in with these internal metrics. We got to develop a certain level of emotional intelligence along the way. What am I actually feeling? And so the leadership quality comes in. It's like, I'm paying attention as I'm moving towards my external outcomes, these goals that I have, but I'm also checking in with myself, my own authority, and saying, what's the experience actually like? And am I willing to be honest about that? I thought if I got a PhD and I went down this career path, it would be amazing. And it sucks. Or I thought if I got married and I had a kid, it'd be great. My parents would be off my back. I'd finally be a success and everything would be great. And it just didn't pan out. So it's like, do we have the guts to be honest with ourselves and say, this isn't quite the experience I was wanting. So can I tap back in and say, what would allow greater freedom? Given that this is where I am, what would allow greater freedom, aliveness, love, or peace in this scenario? And so I think it's key to start with that internal authority, that emotional awareness, build on that bit by bit, small baby steps to larger steps. But then also be willing to say, time out, we've gotten off track here. And we need to take an assessment of what's happening. But most of us don't want to do that because we're back. We've created an identity. But I'm the guy with the PhD and the fancy practice and the people following me and all this kind of stuff. I can't switch now. What will they think of me? I don't want to end up on the street. Those types of things. And that's all too common. And to me, that tells us that we betrayed our inner authority along the way somewhere.
Right. Well, it sounds like, I mean, I think this is a spectrum, but if I just separate two type of guys here, there's the guy who's really good at achieving external goals but yet internally it doesn't feel in congruence and feels off and isn't satisfied and fulfilled. And let's talk about another type of guy for a moment, person who's spent their entire adulthood on emotional intelligence and, feeling whole and integrated and really trying to work on themselves and has intimacy, but is really having trouble achieving the next step in their life, external goals. They're just having a lot of trouble in moving the needle forward and either growing a bigger practice or whatever it is. How do you approach that type of guy?
It's essentially the same thing, right? And I met a lot of these guys in Boulder when I lived there, right? Which is everything was kind of seen and processed through the lens of personal growth. So if my practice wasn't going well, and I'll speak to myself, right? In my early days of my coaching practice, I might need to go do some more ayahuasca and kind of convene, communicate with the other spirits so that I can open this next realm, and then that's going to work. Or I can start to talk to more people who might want to do work with me. I can get out into the world and start to share stories about how I help other people. Shit, that's vulnerable. I don't want to do that. Let me go back up in the mountains and have another ceremony. That's where I'm comfortable. So our commitment to avoiding discomfort, our commitment to avoiding risk. I don't want to waste time, energy, or money. I also, in my community, it's not good to build business. In my community over here, it's greedy. Who wants to be a capitalist? That's not who I am. I'll be excommunicated if I were to move in that direction and start to focus on money. So again, we're up against these commitments. The content changes, but the desire to avoid discomfort, risk, and this threat to our self-image is the same.
Right.
And
so it sounds like you're looking at the perceptions, emotions that are basically keeping a person in their comfort zone versus taking a risk in behaviors that'll actually probably achieve the goal, right?
Yeah. And it's wonderful to be able to leapfrog and be like, oh yeah, the reason why XYZ isn't happening in my life is because of something over here. I'm actually pretty comfortable dealing with problems in this conversation. But if I were to actually learn a new skill, like how to network and get out into the world and talk about my practice and share the story about the work that I do, that's pretty confronting. I don't want to do that. But as a coach, that somebody's like, oh, well, why would you expect that your practice would thrive if nobody knows about it? Why would you expect your practice to thrive if you're not asking your fees? You're basically Mr. Pro Bono guy. So there's just a lot of things where it's pretty easy to kind of chunk down and understand things from a very basic business level and start to see why things aren't working. And then we can see the disconnect between our brains and the stories we tell ourselves that say, well, I can't go do that stuff.
I think this issue about financial health is really important to bring into the conversation. I think that there's just speaking, from my own experience as a young doctor, I was that guy that you're talking about who undercharged people early in my practice. Partly because I wanted to do good work and have people have access to it, but also, as I grew up and got older, I realized that part of my motivation for doing that was because I was afraid of being perceived as greedy or money driven or, those kinds of projections that I think are actually pretty strong in our culture, and especially in the conversation around therapy and healthcare. I think that the people are fraught, and I think I'm fraught too, even now, of like, is it okay to make a good living providing healthcare? You know what I mean? I mean, we have single payer systems in other countries, and we have this system in America that's got a lot of problems. And I think it's interesting to look at the issue of financial disempowerment and therapists and medical providers, because it tends to be a really sensitive topic for people.
It's right up there with sex, and it points to worth. Yeah, whatever I'm able to do or not able to do in the bedroom is a reflection of my worth or my value. Can be. And then also this thing of if I were to really charge something or, be denied something, we can actually put a measurement on it. And in our culture, we do tend to put a measurement like this person's more valuable. And I think it's ridiculous. They make more money. But I learned a valuable lesson early on. It was like, I realized that a client of mine was spending way more money on lawn care for his home than on the work that we were doing. And there was a big, he was telling me like how important our work was, but then where his money was being spent, he was spending, I think he lived in this super fancy neighborhood in Malibu. He spent like $30,000 a year on his lawn. And I wasn't making that money.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money on lawn care, right? Landscaping. And it was just like, let's just come back to when we say we value something, do our actions align with that? But I mean, it still comes up, and it's just the numbers change, but it really is that if we can just start to relax that, oh yeah, but I'm not my fee, right? The fee is about the change that we're creating, the impact that we're having. And that's contextual. That's different for each person based on their life and their financial situation. I'm able to be pretty fluid in the work that I do. I don't charge necessarily the same amount for, the guy up the street as I charge somebody who makes much, much more, right? The fee is based on the context. And I feel much more engaged and inspired when the client and I both realize, hey, what we're working for is really important, and the fee matches that. If one of us feels like, oh, this is just not, the fee just doesn't work here, then I think we can both be insecure about it. But I like to frame things from that position. It's just see, is there a way to where like, yes, this, you say this is really important in your life, but you spend more on ABC. We're not there yet. We're not in alignment yet.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it also goes to the point about being aware of what your comfort zone is, and also, what your goals are, and what in your own authenticity, your own expression in the world is more financial empowerment a part of that landscape for you in your authenticity, or is it more of an injected value, or maybe you're subordinating to an external or cultural message or family message that I'm not valuable unless I'm more financially successful. So I like to think of it as really just what's authentically true for the individual, and what's the path to more of that authenticity. And also, I think, as a therapist, I think it's just generally a truism that if your client doesn't have skin in the game, if they're not spending enough on therapy that they think about it, the likelihood of actually getting that person significant change is way reduced. I mean, it has to be meaningful what the investment is to perceive that you actually are making a big commitment to growth and change.
Yeah, and I do a lot of filtering before I will take on a client. I work really hard to make sure that I'm not bringing a tourist on. I work really hard to make sure that somebody's not coming into my practice and somehow just believes that because they've gone through the process of hiring me that the work is done. So there's a lot of testing that goes into it, and it's one of the reasons why I've chosen the path that I have is because I can really set that bar pretty high. And it weeds out a lot of the people that are just kind of circling the drain and not really interested in doing the work. I don't think that those folks are really helpable. What happens when we work with people that are truly helpable, it's so invigorating. It's a wonderful experience to be able to help people. I came up with a really technical term for it based on Joseph Campbell's work, right? It's like there's people that are ready to go through that, they're in the ordinary world and there's that separation, and then they're on the trial. And I call it pre-fuck it and post-fuck it. Pre-fuck it is they're still in this place where something's going to come along and make the change for them. The next book, the next podcast, they're not going to really have to do anything uncomfortable. They're not going to have to do anything that's going to be at risk for them. Something else is going to come along. They're still essentially in a drama triangle, in a victim place. They're not really to take responsibility. At some point, though, it's like, fuck it. This is up to me. I've exhausted all the avenues. Nobody's coming to save me. Those people are wonderful to work with. I'm not talking about being in a crisis. I'm not talking about being desperate, but there's this place where they have really rooted themselves in self-ownership and just like, this is up to me. I can't blame this on my wife. I can't blame this on my parents anymore. I can't blame this on society. It's up to me to do this work. And wow, working with those people is a dream.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think when somebody is inspired to make a big change in their life and there's a real inspiration and a determination, there's a magic in that experience of working with people that are in that place for sure. And I spent a lot of time in my 30s really focusing on purpose and values and the relationship to growth of knowing your values and your purpose and identifying them and learning how to align behaviors to those purpose and values. And I'm curious about your thoughts on just being purposeful, particularly as a man, and how important is that? And I'm not making any assumptions of what that purpose is, but just how important is it that quote unquote a man is on purpose? I mean, obviously this could apply to women too, but we're talking about men today. So what would you say about that?
I went down that purpose road influenced by a lot of the teachers who probably were all talking about some of the same folks. And it was a trap for me. I spent a long time kind of chasing my own tail looking for purpose. And then I realized that I wasn't getting anywhere. I was in this place of waiting for purpose or waiting for, and in my mind, the way that I was framing it is that it was a story and it was an identity. And that there was going to be this story and this identity that was going to arrive, choose me. This is it. This is what I'm here to do. And now I finally have permission to hit the gas and get going. And that screwed me. It really screwed me. After a while, I said, I can't do this anymore. This is actually killing me. I'm getting weaker waiting around for this thing and starting to create a story that something was wrong with me. And so I gave up on
Tripp, you were coming from a place in this story you're telling. Are you saying you were coming from a place of wanting to discover some big purpose that you just didn't know what it was, and you thought when you discovered it, everything would be fine?
Yeah, which is actually really common, right? Some guys read these certain books that are very idealistic and kind of rooted in kind of these archetypes and they sound wonderful. And then there's like, yes, this is what I'm missing in my life, is this sense of identity and what I'm here to do on this planet before I die kind of thing. And there's a story, and we create purpose from this story or this identity. The ego, what I found is the ego is like, yes, that's me. I love this story. I want to go out and tell this story to the world. This is my purpose. I'm going to show up to my men's group on Tuesday night, and we're going to sit here and say, my purpose is blah, blah, blah in life. And it sounds really fantastic, but it just wasn't working for me. What I did find worked for me when I finally gave up on this idea that I was going to find this fantastic story was just doing what had me feel, where I was curious, following my curiosity, not in a hedonistic way. It was actually very challenging for me. It was more like, gosh, I'm really drawn to this work. I want to learn how to do this better. I can't do that. I mean, who am I? I'm not really a person. Like, I had to still go through this dip of learning. I still had to go through this challenge of that. But I was listening to that, looking back on it now, I was listening to that inner authority. I was like, go here. There's something here for you. There's something that's drawing you to that. There was a hunch, that curiosity. And I found that the more that I did that, the more expansive I felt. I didn't know where it was going. I didn't know where things were headed and that there was even a purpose there. And what I learned from that process was that the purpose in my life would always be the same. It would always be some version of that peace of mind that we're talking about, that deep sense of wholeness, that I'm not living a fragmented life. So again, I come back to the freedom, aliveness, love, and peace, that no matter what I'm working on, the purpose of it is so that I feel more expansive in those areas. At the same time, I will have lots of missions in my life. And that word helped me, that missions could provide things like meaning. Missions could provide a sense of direction and a timeline, that this is what I'm creating in my life at this point. But the mission was always going to be in service of that greater purpose, which was going to be that interior state of being necessarily. That's why I named my daughter B. Right. So it was just this reminder of just come back to this state of being, whatever that might be. It was more like I'm kind of there. I have the sense of that. And when I was bullshitting myself or trying to get in my head about what things are supposed to look like, that I was betraying that.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like you're differentiating that It sounds like you're saying, tell me if I got this right, that purpose, where the trap is that you can externalize how you think your life should look, or hope that eventually you'll discover one day how you think your life should look. And that's more of a fantasy reality than actually just serving in some way in the present moment around an interest, is what I'm hearing, around like what you're most curious and interested about, and just serving in that way and just keep following that drive. And is that how you're kind of segmenting mission versus purpose? Like purpose is more of a fantasy and a hope?
Purpose, I think, in the way that it was framed to me, or the way that I understood it, I'll just take responsibility. The way that I understood it was there was some story. My purpose in life is now to go and heal the suffering of men with my podcast, blah, blah, blah. Just, it sounds cool, but it's just total bullshit. Okay. What actually was more true is I'm going to do what has me feel more alive, what has me feel more expansive, what gives me a sense of meaning, what blows my heart open, what has more. At the end of the day, I was like, man, that was freaking awesome. I can't believe I got to do that. I get to live this life. That to me is how I know I'm on track, or I'm on purpose, is when I'm moving in that direction. And it's not an easy path. There's a lot of risk taking. There's a lot of discomfort. There's a lot of, who in the hell is this guy to think he can go in this direction? He doesn't have a PhD. He doesn't have all this stuff. It's just a lot of challenge in that regard. And so that's where these shorter term missions can become. It's like, okay, I'm going to learn how to do this skill really well. And I'm going to develop a practice in this way. Or I'm going to develop a podcast, right? And those are all in service of, they're all essentially experiments. Let me see if this has me feel more expansive. Let me see. And if it doesn't, after a certain amount of time, year, 3 years, whatever, 2 years, 6 months, then we know we got good data and we can move on. But that helped me far better for me, the way that I operate in the world, than coming up with this vision, this idea, and kind of like putting it over my eyes and then moving through the world as if I'm going to become this person. And then I'm finally going to be enough and I'll finally be loved. It was, that stuff still felt rooted in, I'm not enough and I need to prove something.
And when you work with men, do you sometimes have to tease out, like if a man's saying to you, I really know I want to be doing this thing in the world. I really know I do. Like, but I can't get my behaviors behind it. I keep doing addictive behaviors, whatever it is, but I really believe this is what I want to do. Are you having to tease out, like, is that fantasy? Is that actually a kind of mission? Like, how do you deal with that issue?
Let's say that all three of us, right? We had some epiphany today, and we have this thing that we were able to see for the first time. It's like, this is what I feel drawn towards. And I've been hiding it from myself, that I'm actually drawn in this direction. I've created a story about who Will is, who Tripp is, who Keith is. And now I've got this hunch that this is where I'm moving. This is what's really more true for me. That's a terrifying place. It's really scary. We are going to come up with all kinds of stories to avoid that. It's going to be like, oh, you've got to be freaking kidding me. This can't be my work. This is going to threaten everything that I want to do. So to answer your question, I expect that resistance to come up. I expect my client to have a really hard time saying, yeah, let's go full steam ahead. I expect him to give me the best excuses ever. Oh man, the moon, are you kidding me? The moon phase right now? I can't do that. And everybody knows, the bass are on the other side of the lake. You can't fish where I'm here. There's so many excuses, and I hear excuses all day long. And it's more like, come on, let's just chunk it down. What's the smallest thing that we can do? And let's see how this impacts your experience. I remember I had this, I was in this place of like, yeah, what do I do? What actually has me feel alive? This was years and years ago. And I was, I'd been invited to kind of help facilitate a workshop in San Francisco for men. And was just everywhere I went, I just felt like I didn't belong. I wasn't in my place and I wasn't doing anything. And I was facilitating this workshop, and it was basically a lot of guys that weren't part of kind of our background. They'd never been in men's groups. They'd never done any kind of emotional work, none of this kind of stuff. And there was this guy, and he'd gone through, he'd been led through a process, and it had really activated him. And he was having a lot of emotions, and I just, nobody was really supporting him. And I said, hey, let's go up on the roof. It was a maybe 4 or 5 story building. We're in like downtown San Francisco. We go up on the roof and he's having his process. He's crying. I'm just sitting there holding space with him, just looking at him and helping him out. And he's like, oh God. And he throws up over the side of the building. Meanwhile, there's a little cafe right down below and all these people are looking up and watching this guy throw up. And in that moment, I heard a voice go, this is it. This is what you do. And I was like, oh, you gotta be freaking kidding me. Like this is not it. This is not helping, and it wasn't necessarily, I learned that it wasn't about helping guys necessarily with their emotional stuff, but it was just being there and supporting men. That's where I felt alive. That's where I felt like I belonged. That's where I felt that wholeness and that sense of meaning. And since then it has transformed. It was never a linear path. It's always been deviating and it's always been up to me to come back and be like, oh, where's it going now? Where's it? Oh, it's more of these guys. Yeah, I like guys that are creating in this way. And then it just keeps shifting. I wouldn't do that if I was married to that vision of what it had to look like or that story. It's always about coming back and kind of feeling it as I go down the road, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Speaking of married, using that word in a different context, kind of a little bit of a right turn here in the interview, but I've been thinking about how I felt a call in my life a few years ago. That was a call to create this institute with Keith and to actually have a bigger impact in the world. And the seed of that call was inside me for years, but it wasn't until I had a new relationship in my life, a new woman in my life, that my level of resource and security in my emotional world had elevated to the point where I wasn't having to constantly be in a conflict with my partner or check and make sure everything's okay with my partner, because we were in a more healthy dynamic, and getting met and known and seen in ways that I hadn't had before in my life, that the call became something that I could actually admit into conscious awareness. And so I'm curious your thoughts. I mean, I know I've admired Allison for years and, known her as a friend for many years. And I'm kind of like curious your thoughts about like the bigger relational context about the fear of going bigger, or the fear of doing something that other people might judge, or, that you might fail, or whatever the fear is.
What do we typically, I think it's helpful to come back to what men typically do, right? Which is men tend to make work the center point of their life. They say family is really important, but if we look at where their time and energy is put, it's work. If you take a guy's job away from him, his career, like he will tailspin. That's his identity. That's his sense of like, hey, I'm earning my keep. There's like all that primitive wiring stuff it just gets activated. It's really, really dangerous place. And so most of the time we're kind of waiting for work to be in its right place. And then we feel a permission to pursue everything else, right? Oh, well, I'll go do a vacation 2 weeks out of the year and I'll get around to maybe spending some time with my wife. Unless she wants to go to therapy. All right, we'll go to therapy every once in a while. Like whatever these types of things are, but that kind of becomes this block and everything seems to fit around work. And the guys are really glad to do that. It's where they find a lot of reward. It's a lot of control there. If we were to flip that model, and there's essentially like, what am I really here to experience in my lifetime? What am I really here to give? And then I could start to look at, is anything an obstacle in there? Now, if there's this arrow, this giant arrow that I'm just on this path and I'm moving, I don't even know where it's going necessarily. I don't know what it looks like. But is my relationship something that's an obstacle? Or does it actually add energy to me? Most of the time, we're just getting by and our relationship's a drain and it's a drag. Where we live can be a drag, whether it's the weather or the fact that we don't get outside and do things. We don't have community, or the people that we're with. Maybe there's a certain group think in that community, like you described, where it's like, I can't go big because my community will judge me for that. So essentially, we want to kind of do this, integrally informed look at what's supporting me, is my body, where I live, the type of work that I'm doing, my relationships, my own self-talk. How are these all allies to me? And not just getting out of the way, but actually supporting me. And I think most of us are just kind of like, what's not a drag for me? But I like to push a little further. And it's like, what does it look like when you've got real support, like people that are just cheerleading, like, go, go, go. You got this. Of course you have this vision, Will. Of course you got to go for it. Imagine what that's like, instead of like, oh, really? Good luck with that.
Right.
So I think it's great to assess that. And for a lot of us, we don't know what most of us getting by is the goal, especially if we grew up in shitty relationships or we're watching shitty relationships. But what does it look like to really be in a partnership that supports us in that way? And so I think I find that really helpful when I talk to people or I talk to my clients. It's like, why are you choosing this woman? Or why are you choosing this partner every day? Because you're choosing this partner every day. So let's get really clear about why you're choosing this partner every day. And that can be a tough question because there's essentially this inertia like, well, I chose her then, so she's still around. And we might realize that I choose this person because therefore I don't have to be my big self. I don't really have to go.
Versus being with a person who demands you to be your biggest self.
Or loves you into your big self, right? Like loves you so much that they see your big self and your gifts and all that you have to give and just say, I got you here, baby. I want this for you. If you want this, I'm here for you. I'd love to see you spread your wings. It's so hot when you spread your wings. It's scary for me because I'm afraid you might go away. I'm afraid it might diminish but I see our relationship as something bigger. These are the vows that Allison and I took was, I'm here to support you in your bigness, even if that means I got to get out of the way. It wasn't about the marriage. It was about how do we support each other in that place where we can support one another in that place. Mm-hmm. And so there are times when she wants to launch a program where I'm doing my thing. And it's like, initially there's a contraction. It's like, well, shit, I won't see you. Or that's going to be kind of a pain in the ass for me. And it's like, well, no, where am I going to ground myself here? And
it's not to say that every part is on board 100% of the time. I mean, their younger parts are going to come up and do get scared and don't know what the change means or if they're going to get taken care of and all those things.
And I think it's great to have space for that in the relationship, and I might be a pissy little 7-year-old in the kitchen for half an hour and I'm like, I don't want to do that. And then it's like, all right, this is what we're really doing here. And I get it. Yeah, let's do it.
Are you willing to share any ways Allison was able to really challenge you in a way to grow that you just couldn't see happening without it? Some ways that, your partner was there for you to push you, not just be supportive and say like, I just want you to fly, but ways she actually said like, you need to get your shit together, or like ways she challenged you to grow. That was really helpful for you.
I don't know if she's ever been, you need to get your shit together. There's never been like that vibe. There's always been more of an encouragement. Like, you got this. Like, I see this in you. But not like if you don't do this or else, right? There's still that tinge of that. I demand it or else. It's just more like, water's fine.
Like trust, like seeing who you are.
Yeah.
And just
I see that you're bigger than this. Yeah, you're bigger than this challenge kind of thing. And when you want to go there, let's go. Right. Or I see you getting ready to go do this and I got you kind of thing. Our role primarily with one another, and then I will come back to a story. We've been really clear that our roles together, that we are lovers. So I don't want her to be my men's group. I don't want her to be my coach, and vice versa. She does not, she really doesn't like me being her coach as much as I try sometimes, right? And fail. So we don't play those roles, but we bring people into our lives that will. And so that might be some places where she will push back, or I will be like, hey, this is some place where you need some support here. I don't want to play this role, but you need this role. You need somebody in your life to play this challenger role. I can be the supportive person, but we need a challenger here for you because you're hiding out. So we're going to protect the dynamic of ourselves as lovers here. But yes, this is where we would be gifted by having some challengers in our life there. And that, I think that's where it's kind of comes back to it takes a village type of thing. One thing that she did help me with early on, I had always been taught that anger was bad. I didn't see the difference between anger and aggression. And so early on in our relationship, I was really pissed off about, I had completely disowned the part of me that wanted to not be married my entire life. I'd been in a rock band. I was used to playing the field. I was used to kind of having anything I wanted whenever I wanted. So I went and fell in love with Allison. We got married. And then this part of me was like, what the fuck, dude? You didn't like, we were supposed to just kind of really party this thing out the rest of our lives. And I was depressed and really down. And I think I went up and saw Dewey one time and scared the shit out of a horse. The horse was going flying across the thing, like, get away from me. So it was like, I remember her sitting me down and I was just like, I think I'm really angry. And she's like, I'm not afraid of your anger. And she's like, I'm okay with your anger. And I wasn't okay with my anger. I'd always been taught that it was bad. And I was taught that it was unsafe, especially around a woman. And she was more like, no, I got it. I can hang. And it wasn't bringing aggression to her. I want to be really specific that it wasn't about like coming at her with anything, but the fact that I could be angry. But I was in a dynamic where owning my anger was not safe. And so that was transformative for me. I got in that moment. She demonstrated, I love you more than probably you love yourself. I accept you more than you accept yourself. That inspires devotion in me. Like that is like, I will fucking move mountains for you, lady. Like instead of having somebody come at me and nitpick me and you're not doing this enough and you need to own your thing. You need to go like, it's like, fuck you. I don't want to have anything to do with that. But this person that can demonstrate like, I see you and I accept you, even in the places where you can't accept yourself, I was like, you got me. So that was big. And that's where I really started to get what it felt like to have somebody to have my back. And that was I guess a love language for me is that kind of loyal, having somebody be that loyal for me.
Nice.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Tripp.
Yeah.
Well, we wrap up same way with everyone, basically asking you kind of a big question, which is if you had a billboard with a paragraph on it and everyone would see it once in their lifetime, what would you say in that moment to them?
Get over yourself. I say be bold, be playful, and get over yourself. Those are the things that I come to every day. So it's easy for me to come back, but life's a lot easier for me. I'll just speak if I can get over myself. Like it's just that tends to be the place where I get tripped up over and over again. It's like, oh, I've started thinking too much about this.
Nice.
Thanks for being on the show, Tripp.
Thanks, guys.
Great to see you again, Tripp.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah, good to see you.